Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this panel discussion with our esteemed panelists. My name is Beta, and I'll be moderating this panel. I'm joining you from Mohkinstsis, which on settler maps you'll recognize as Calgary, Alberta. And before we get started, I'll let the panelists introduce themselves and give a little bit of background on what they do. And we'll start with Jose. Jose, go ahead.
So hi everyone, my name is Jose Street and my family is from Martin Falls First Nations here in Ontario. And my spirit name is Wapemikonisqueo, which means white feather woman. And I am in North Bay right now. So I recently got the exciting news that I am now a operator in training for the Ontario First Nations Technical Services Corporation. And it was a very big blessing to come into my life. So I will now be working in the water fields. For the past couple of years, I was working as a forest fire ranger, and that was an amazing experience as well. And I think we'll go hand in hand with going into the water field. But yeah, so that's a little bit about myself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gideon Menti, and I am coming to you from Mohkinstsis, which you'll recognize on settler maps as Calgary, Alberta. My family is from Ethiopia, although I'm born and raised in Treaty 7 territory here in Alberta. I am trained as a water resource engineer, specializing in stormwater management and wastewater treatment. And big congratulations to Jose.
Hello, I'm Warren Brown. I'm with Lytton First Nations O&M department. I'm the manager. I've been with Lytton First Nation since 2002 and became a certified water operator in 2002. So I've been in this industry for 20 years. Great to be here. Thank you.
I'm Dion Hassler, circuit rider trainer. I'm from Carry the Kettle First Nations. I actually work for File Hills Capella Tribal Council out of Fort Capel, Saskatchewan. I look after 11 communities, assist operators with operating and maintaining their water plants, and I'm there for any repairs and any assistance that they need in any type. But basically, I originally got my start in the military, which is U.S. Navy, operated a wastewater plant, and then was in charge of the water. And I grew up in California. And when I've been here about 30 some years and been trying to do what I can when it comes to the water, because when I first come here, it's seeing people still hauling water. When I grew up in the city, we take it for granted. And that's just the way I came across. I needed to help the communities. And now as I started at the water plant on Carry the Kettle, moved on to circuit rider, where I can help not just my community, but others. And I'm also doing that with the water movement. So it's great to be here on board with them.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. I'm super excited to have you all here. We have everyone from engineers to operators. So we're going to have an incredible panel today. Now, before we get too into it, Warren, I know you mentioned you have 20 years of experience in the sector. So I'm going to throw the first question at you. Some of our audience members may not know, but what exactly is the role of being a water treatment operator?
So the role of being a, a water treatment operator is just to produce safe drinking, potable drinking water for my communities. So I've got a very important job of trying to keep my community members safe. And these are all voters, so we need their votes to keep me in office. Just kidding. But yeah, we come up with the safe drinking water. We try to work with other professionals to try and make improvements to the existing water systems to try and make safe water faster and more efficiently, trying to save money where we can and try to get the water treated as quickly as possible for the use of the public. We're also there for the protecting the watersheds, so we have to know what's going on around the water plants that are serving our people, just so if there's any construction or logging or something, we have to get involved to make sure they're not going to be contaminating any of our water sources. The other part is on the reserves, we're pretty well the jack of all trades and the master of one, which is water. So I get a lot of calls from people asking about electrical questions, a leak under the sink, just general questions that some people just need some help around the house, and we'll try to help them as best we could.
It's a big description. You guys are, like you said, you do a little bit of everything. And I think one of the challenges that we often see is because communities are remote, they usually have just one operator dealing with everything. And Dion, I know you've worked in the Navy and you have a lot of experience working in different communities. I was hoping you can kind of give the audience a little bit of explanation on the difference of working in a municipality versus in Indigenous communities and how it's different and more challenging to work in a remote community.
Working in the First Nation communities, that I get to see what all the different things that have gone on. And, it's one thing that our federal regulations is what we follow, but it confuses some of our operators. What regulations do we follow, provincial or federal? So, getting to understand the differences. Do they really know and what they are? But, working in a non-First Nation community is also a good experience to see what the differences are. And, basically comes down to the funding of these water plants. In our First Nation communities, we always know that our water operators are underfunded. They don't get paid equally compared to our non-First Nations, even though they have the same type of job. But in our First Nation communities, our newer water plants have a little more advanced technologies and more equipment to look after. So our water plants operators have more responsibilities, but they're underpaid. There's also in some of the sophistication of these water plants, it takes a little bit more knowledge, skill to operate these water plants. Well, when it comes to classifying these water plants, sometimes they're degraded in First Nation communities. So the operators aren't really getting paid enough for what they're operating, maintained, and to keep that water safe for our communities. So that's just one big difference. But like I said, it's just the support that we get from funding. We know that it's not enough because as a circuit rider, guys call me to come in and do their repairs. And it is, to me, I'm getting kind of frustrated with some of the repairs of just trying to keep these old water plants going, because it's just a constantly, one thing breaks, another thing breaks. And I keep going back and trying to fix these things and keep it off of boiled water advisories, but I'm just wondering, when is INAC going to actually step up and fix these water plants? They need a new water plant. They're not designed to last as long as some of these water plants have been going. So, that's what I said. It's just some of the difference that we have to deal with.
Absolutely, and I think the challenges are common across Canada, and hopefully we can pull together more resources and more funding to support some of the challenges you brought up. But I think what's interesting is the term water operator that we frequently use is really a modern day water keeper. And Jose, I know you've touched this on your series of videos that you've filmed with water movement. And just a small plug, if you're interested, go check those out. She shares a lot of knowledge and stories about traditions of water. But if you can just share with us, how can water operators practice traditional teachings in their day-to-day role?
So as someone who just started the career in the field with the teachings that I have, the one thing I do want to practice and teach is the equality and respect in which water should be treated. My seasonal job as a fire ranger had me traveling to different areas in Ontario quite frequently, but no matter how busy I was, I always made the time to introduce myself to the water. And the water that I was using to, cook and drink and bathe myself with. So this created a relationship and changes the perspective of how the spirit of Nabe lives with us, Nabe meaning water. It is selfish to treat Nabe as if they were only put on here on earth to serve us. So I think I really want to reconnect people and their relationship with the land. And one of the relationships that they should work on is being one with water first. As well as in the culture, we have a lot of teachings that incorporate circles, and it often represents that we are part of a cycle. And I try to, when I'm teaching others about why I'm passionate, is that we are all a part of the water cycle. So these teachings are there for us to remember how to practice humility, because humility, being one of the 7 grandfather teachings as well, is there to show us that we are part of creation and that we are part of that cycle. So of course now, after the connection to our lands and our roles have been broken, the relationship and responsibilities that women carry have become much more complex. Because I myself am part of the lineage of residential schooling and the 60s scoop, my connection to my community and my elders is very slim to none. When I started to express interest in becoming a water keeper, it was extremely difficult for me to learn what should have been my hands-on teachings, really, from my elders. I looked towards, online support and venturing out on my own. But this again was not a very fulfilling process. When we try to get back to those simple and delicate teachings, the world has changed. The way that Indigenous women have to fight for water rights has changed. It's unfamiliar for us to have to fight through the court systems to protect our lands. Being so young and going into this field is amazing because I get to carry these teachings, but now I see it as almost my responsibility to create a new form of protection that it can easily translate to the modern world that we live in, while also still honoring our history. So I think that's where a big complication comes into of how I can practice my traditional teachings in my role, because as a powerhouse of a woman that I am, I need to create those spaces. So that's what I look forward to. But I think also Warren can probably touch on that and relate to that, about creating those spaces and putting that effort into making that.
Absolutely incredible to hear. And I think we'll stay with you. And I think you touched on this a little bit, but we do need to encourage more youth, and specifically Indigenous youth, to enter the water sector and to learn about the traditional sides of water and learn the modern day practices. So as someone who's just entering the field and who's super passionate and excited, what do you think we can do to encourage or inspire more youth to enter the sector?
So as Warren was talking about, I don't think there's any, I can't emphasize enough about this type of job being so complex in so many different fields. Like, you really have to be, a master of all almost, or jack of all trades. So it has a very expansive amount of skills to learn. And, as I go into some of the high schools to speak on my career, in the Zoom meetings, I try to emphasize that they will encourage you and your skills. Like, you will always be needed, no matter the type of personality going into the field. Like, you will be accepted and you will flourish because there's just so much to do. It's always in demand. That's another good one, for me as well. Obviously, looking for a job, it will always be in demand. It will always be, it's kind of like a nurse in a zombie apocalypse type of situation. That's what I kind of think of it as. It's also extremely fulfilling in terms of being a part of the solution to the clean water crisis. Anytime I'm a part of circles that talk about this, it is just, it fills the cup. It makes me very happy. So I try to let people see that passionate side. It's very technical, but I really want to emphasize the love and support in the community that comes from being in a job like this.
Beautifully said. And I think we'll also pass this question on to Gideon. And Gideon, I know you have incredible experience working with communities and even working internationally in water. And like Jose said, when you work in water, you'll always be needed. It's an international industry and sector. So what would you say inspired you to work in the field, and why should youth be inspired to enter it?
Great question. And right off the bat, I just want to echo what Jose was saying, in that there's always going to be a demand for people working in water. And I think as we look to the future and really question how our communities all over the world are going to respond to man-made climate change, we need to be really critical about thinking about how water is going to be a part of that. The reason why I started working in the water sector is because I had the privilege of growing up in a small town in southern Alberta in Treaty 7 territory. And even though I grew up in a small town of 14,000 people, it was not like I had to worry about where my water was coming from. However, my family in Ethiopia lives in a city of 4 million in Addis Ababa, and my grandmother doesn't have clean water in her house. So when I had the incredible opportunity to visit as a child, that was the thing that stuck out to me as I returned back to my home, and realizing that I had immense privilege, even though I was living in a much smaller municipality comparatively. I had access to clean water, and my grandmother did not, living in such a big city, like halfway around the world. That realization really led me to question what needs to happen in order for municipalities to have all the resources that you need to keep kids healthy and safe. And not just municipalities, but towns and villages of all sizes around the world. And in high school, as I was beginning to explore this question in my non-Indigenous context, that's when I realized that here in Canada, not just outside around the world, but here in my own country, that there are so many communities that are still lacking access to clean drinking water and the necessities of life that I grew up my whole life taking for granted. So that's the reason why I studied civil engineering. And I studied civil engineering because I had an affinity towards math and science. And because my father wanted me to be an engineer, and he thought it would be a good idea for me to have a good, secure job in the future. However, as I went through my university career, I realized that I had a passion for connecting with people, for communicating and storytelling. And I began to have this internal tension of being an engineer and being technically competent, and also wanting to be a people connector and work and make sure that I was doing something every day that made a difference to the people around me. And I'm really grateful that when I graduated, I found an opportunity in a small civil engineering company to work in the intersection of the technical, scientific aspects of wastewater treatment, but also work in policy, where I needed to understand how different governments and organizations and countries managed and built policy, and how that interacted at the level of a village, of a town, and how that had an impact on the types of technologies that would be used to treat water. So my very broad interests in my divided personality, but all aspects of my identity were helpful in being a good engineer. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think a lot of youth should consider working in water, because the technology side is important, but a lot of that has been solved. So we need people who are able to understand the technology, but also create beautiful systems of people management and education and creativity, and creating great videos like Jose and Vita at Water Movement to tell the full story of water and make sure that there's a sustainable future for all of us.
Absolutely incredible, Gideon. I always love hearing your speak and hearing your story. And I think kind of something I'll tune into is the part you mentioned about how water issues is international. And as climate change continues to affect communities across the globe, we'll continue to see water shortages, droughts, and floods, which will bring a lot of challenges to operators working day in and day out to provide safe drinking water to their communities. And with that, Dion, how do you think we can preserve and protect water in the face of climate change?
Oh, there's actually a few things like, just little things is making sure that all our leaks at home we don't have any leaks coming from our taps at home. I've been into one community here where the water plant couldn't keep up in the summertime because maybe somebody was watering their lawn and went away for a few weeks and discovered that there was the water plant just couldn't keep up. It was running 24/7 at times just to meet the water demand of somebody, also the swimming pools. There was another concern. People were filling up. Some people only had 2 swimming pools in their yard, but we got to more conserve the water as we use it. We recognize the things that happened in California as their big drought, where they also had to dig deeper for their well water. We also got to protect our source water. Basically, we talk about protecting where we're getting our water from, making sure that it doesn't get contaminated. And it's just those type of programs that we talk about, getting people to understand how do we protect our source water, how do we protect our lakes, our rivers, our streams. Goes all back to also, we have a big issue here in the Fall Hills Capel Tribal Council. We have a river that goes through several communities, and trying to deal with the contaminants that it's created. Nobody wants to use that water. It's getting so polluted it's not even being recommended for recreation purposes. But it all goes back to the design of these wastewater plants. The wastewater plants need a better design to treat everything that's coming out, because even in the wintertime now, we got discovered in the last 2 years that we got blue ice. It's coming, and that's all due to the algae that wasn't depleted in the fall from the blue-green algae. So we think about, a lot of people may think that it was from pesticides or a problem with the lake being polluted, but actually it's actually human waste. And if we can do a better job of protecting our water, and we'd have to do less filtration, like some of the designs that weren't properly done years ago. We're wasting a lot of money just trying to keep these old water plants running, equipment breaking down. So there's a lot of wasted water trying to be made from this, and still people are drinking contaminated water or water that's of color. Well, that's just nobody wants to see, nobody wants to deal with. So I think we have to do a better job of protecting our water. The climate change has made a difference, because we're losing our glaciers. Here, Canada is one of the biggest world that has lots of water, thanks for our glaciers. But, as the water comes downstream through BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, the water is harder to treat. So, and that's unlike here in Saskatchewan, we've gotten away, most of our communities have got away from using surface water. We're mainly groundwater, and making sure that, that groundwater is protected. We got to talk to, like I said, it's just talking about protecting our source water. Like, I know years ago, maybe people were taking water out of sloughs, and I know my parents talked to me about taking the water from the slough out in a bucket, and they'd take the wagon into that and collect their water. And how did they know if the water was safe? Well, there was bugs in it. That would tell them that the water was safe. There was no bugs, animals wouldn't drink it. So here today, we can't even do that. We have, like I said, some of the farmer pesticides. Also, a lot of our sloughs have dried up. That just shows you some of the climate change. And then we also have some of the wells in some of our communities that have never dried up ever since they've been there. And it's the first time that these wells have dried up. They noticed the wells did go really low in the 30s, but here they're dried up down. That was pretty remarkable to see. Some of our elders had talked to us about some of these about some of these sloughs and where they were getting their water and how good it was. There was aquifers that were water coming right out of the ground, artesian wells. Well, they were just drinking right out of that. We know they were good, but we don't have them today due to our climate change. We look at new technologies that are out there. We have above us clouds, atmosphere. As well, warm weather increases, we have more water in the atmosphere now. So we got to find new technologies to deal with that. So how do we, it's just, it's a struggle to see what happens when it comes to not protecting our waters and what we're dealing with today.
Really well said, Dion. And I think I'll just touch on one thing you said that was really interesting, that there was designs done years ago that they weren't done right. And I think that's a key issue we keep seeing in communities, is that cookie cutter designs just aren't cutting it. And I think it all goes back to collaboration and engaging community operators from the get-go of a project. And I know, Warren, you've had a couple of successful projects where you noticed how incredible and valuable collaboration was. Do you have any examples you can share of why it's so important for the youth, so Jose, Gideon, as they go on to new projects, to remember to collaborate with all stakeholders?
Yes, collaboration with First Nations communities. One of the approaches that was used that I experienced being a water operator in our community was working with Réseau out of UBC. They had a great approach where they were approached by the leaders, or the leaders approached them. I'm not 100% which way it went, but they talked to the leaders first. So they spoke with our chief and maybe a counselor or two. And then once they spoke with our leaders, they invited the managers in to also talk about the water project. And then they had another meeting again with the managers, the leaders, and the community. So from all these meetings, they developed surveys for the community to fill out and answer, which sort of promoted a bit of the community involvement and a bit of inclusion for our community to take part in, as to how the water system would look, or what kind of expectations are they expecting from the water quality in the end. So it was nice to read their answers on that. And the other good thing was they always gave us regular updates on the project, or they gave us updates on changes in one of the projects, or if one of the jobs had to change suddenly, they had to do it a day before instead of the day after. They made sure they gave us enough time to know what's happening so that people can prepare for either a water shutdown or a whole bunch of equipment going through the neighborhood, but just to give them a heads up that that's happening. And that approach was great. And I really felt the community liked that, and they started trusting the Réseau students that came around and started talking with them. Yeah, just opened up a really good dialogue with them.
Absolutely, and I think that continuous dialogue was really key in your success. And Dion, I see your hand is raised. Feel free to unmute.
Yeah, I was just going to mention when you talked about the design of the water plants and the collaboration with these people here, but I experienced one recently is, well, even the engineer didn't even look at the source water. I mean, he didn't test as well. He didn't look at his water analysis well enough when he designed just an RO system and went to a nano. And really, it just, there it is, a bad choice. You know, we had problems, and I had to, I'm not an engineer, but thing is, I had to kind of explain to him what was going on with our chlorine and the color change of our water. So, you know, they're not always making the right decisions. I mean, didn't even look the water analysis. That got pretty bad when something like that happens. And like I said, we have green sand filters that couldn't handle all the amounts of iron, manganese that were going through some of our older filters. So that's why we kind of moved towards a biological system, because the biological system is also environmentally friendly, because we're using air and oxygen instead of chemicals.
Dion, I really loved what you said about how sometimes engineers are not looking at the root problem of the issue. They're not actually taking a good check at their analysis, but just jumping into the way things have always been done. And I think when it comes to water engineering, my experience of working in a small company was really eye-opening, because we would often be competing on projects against much larger companies that had established ways of doing things. They knew exactly how it was going. The folks in those roles had been doing it for decades, and that's just the way everything was always done. But as a smaller firm, when we had the opportunity to actually work with the communities, to talk to leaders, and ask them what they really wanted, and to learn that there's a priority from water treatment operators, that we want to reduce the amount of chemicals we're using so we can simplify projects. We want to rely on natural systems like the biological systems Dion mentioned. Not only is that exciting for smaller communities that are struggling to find the right resources, or Indigenous communities that are not being supported the way that they really should be. It's also exciting and innovative for larger communities. And I think that when we start talking about like these massive cities across the country that need to respond to the threats of climate change on the watershed, it's these innovative solutions that are happening in smaller municipalities and in villages and towns across the country where there is this need, that that true leadership is happening when water treatment operators such as yourselves and engineers are coming together collaborative. You have the right heads around the table. I think that gives me hope for all of us from sea to sea to sea.
Well, just to top on that, really, the one reason I really wanted to speak up on this is because leadership doesn't always know the best choices. They don't have experience in the water plant. A lot of our leadership never steps into the water plant to see what's been going on. And that's one reason I stress to educate the leadership on what's going on. I mean, there are some leadership that are or used to be water plant operators, and some of them that are still are part-time water plant operators. They know what's going on, but the thing is, not a lot of them do it, and we've experienced where a lot of these designs just don't work. We're learning from those experiences. Like, I come from a architectural background. That's what I was doing in high school before I joined the military. And the thing is, we want to talk and learn from other people. Want to hear what they want and what they would feel like. But like I said, leadership is not the one stepping into the water plant and dealing with all the repairs that we're dealing with. And as a circuit rider, I'm assisting these operators and seeing what they're dealing with. There's times I go into those water plants and the operator has no tools to work with. What does that tell you? So it's just what are the things that we're dealing with today? It's there's a lot of different issues. It's just some that are a lot easier to solve than others.
Thank you for bringing that up. I think now more than ever, we need the public and leadership to be aware of these issues. And hopefully, and thanks to you guys for joining a panel discussion like this, hopefully we can get the word out there. And with that, I'll leave the floor. We have a few more minutes if anyone has anything else to add. But again, I want to thank everyone for joining this panel. Yes, go ahead, Josie.
The connection that women have, I think because it's so involved in my life, I forget that people don't know the basic teachings of how our moon cycle, our period, is linked to the water and the water cycle and our different traditions. For example, like the cup that I've been drinking out of, people might recognize in ceremony. It's a copper mug, and it clarifies the water. So we use this a lot in our traditions, and I leave it out for Grandmother Moon to bless during the full moons each month, and I pray to her and in that good spirit. And then also our role as child bearers, the water of the womb, and connects back to how Mother Nature is constantly nurturing us with the water of the rivers and oceans and different lakes and water supplies and whatnot. So for the people who don't know the teachings of that, that's why women in our communities are honored as water keepers, is because our role as child bearers and our connection to our moon cycle. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Warren.
Yeah, one last thing to roles of the water operator I should have added, I forgot to add, was educators. So we also help fellow operators with questions that they may have, or I may lean on another operator asking a question. We're sort of teaching each other how to solve the problem that one of us doesn't know. And the other thing is presentations to your local schools. Myself, I've done a few presentations at the 2 schools here, and have given a few tours of our water facility, where I've actually done some simple demonstrations of just water magic, making water change color for the students. So.
No, that was a great ad, and I want to thank both Warren and Dion. I know you guys are both heavily involved in really inspiring the next generation of water leaders, not just through events like this, but really through going to in-person events and conferences and schools. So I really appreciate it. And with that, I think we can wrap up. Thank you everyone so much for your time. We'll say goodbye.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.